It's fans all over the world. Rimac, coming from a startup, now with the innovative spirit of electromobility to build fantastic hypercars, and Porsche as a strong financial partner with all its experience. And we think to combine everything together, we are looking forward to a fantastic future of Bugatti.
This story starts with a wrecked Bugatti, but it ends with Porsche walking away. Between those two moments lies one of the most fascinating automotive controversies in recent memory. When YouTube mechanic Matt Armstrong agreed to rebuild a crashed Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport.
There's this guy named Matt Armstrong. Have you guys heard of him? Probably, right? So he supposedly fixed cars. He supposedly wanted to fix this car.
Few expected the project to reach beyond the workshop, but what followed involved blocked parts, locked VIN numbers, public statements from CEOs, and a growing debate over who truly controls a car after it is sold. What began as one mechanic saying yes to one impossible car became something that Porsche's CEO, Bugatti's CEO, and millions of viewers around the world could not look away from. The rebuild that started it all. To understand why Porsche's CEO statement landed the way it did, you have to start at the beginning. In Miami, in late 2025, with one of the rarest cars on the planet sitting in pieces at a salvage workshop. The car was a Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport. Only 60 of them exist in the entire world. This particular one had belonged to Alex Gonzalez.
The youngest person ever, 25 years old, has just bought back the most expensive car.
A Miami-based content creator who had crashed it during a filmed stunt. The damage was catastrophic by any engineering standard. The front end was destroyed. The airbags had deployed across the interior. The transmission housing was shattered. The carbon fiber structural spine, the single most critical load-bearing element in the entire car's architecture, the component every other system depends on, had sustained damage that went far beyond anything surface level. Insurance assessed the situation, came back with a parts-only repair bill of $1.7 million.
Considering the fact that they came down 70% from their original $1.7 million offer for just parts and minor labor,
and wrote the car off entirely. By every conventional measure, the Chiron Pur Sport was finished. Alex Gonzalez did not accept that verdict. He bought the wrecked car back from the Copart salvage auction for approximately $1.9 million. More than the repair estimate itself, and made a decision that the automotive world was still processing months later. He called not Bugatti, not a factory-authorized workshop in Europe, but a self-taught mechanic from Leicester, England, named Matt Armstrong, who had spent years building a YouTube following by bringing wrecked supercars back from the dead one, impossible project at a time. Matt flew to Miami, walked into the workshop, studied the damage from every angle, and agreed to try. That single decision, one mechanic saying yes to one owner who refused to accept a write-off, set in motion a chain of events that would eventually draw in Bugatti's CEO, Porsche's board of directors, international right-to-repair debates, and one of the most dramatic corporate exits in recent automotive history. What gave Matt's decision genuine credibility, something beyond personal confidence, was a documented track record that existed in the public domain for anyone to examine. He had rebuilt a Lamborghini Aventador.
This Lamborghini Revuelto used to look like this. £425,000 later, it now looks like this.
He had rebuilt a Ferrari. He had taken cars that specialists with formal training and professional workshops had declared beyond saving, worked through every problem on camera without editing out the failures, and driven those cars afterward. His archive of completed work was not a claim about what he could do. It was verifiable public evidence of what he had already done. And that evidence was precisely what made Bugatti's institutional response, when it came, look to much of the watching world like something more than a straightforward safety concern. When a manufacturer responds to one independent builder with the full institutional weight of its corporate apparatus, the question that forms immediately in the public mind is whether the concern is genuinely about safety or genuinely about control. Matt Armstrong's track record made that question impossible to avoid. The workshop itself was not a factory. It did not have Bugatti's precision tooling, its proprietary diagnostic architecture, or the specific testing environments that Bugatti engineers rely on during production. What it had was a team willing to fabricate parts from scratch when official channels were blocked, and a camera running at every stage so that nothing about the process could be hidden or misrepresented after the fact. That transparency, filming every failure alongside every success, and putting all of it in front of millions of viewers, became one of the most consequential decisions in the entire story.
The airbags, we seem to have it covered. We just want to get the dashboard airbag out, but the way it's going, so far, we're looking good for the interior.
Because it meant that when Bugatti raised its safety objections publicly, the millions of people who had watched every episode of the rebuild had a continuous factual record against which to measure those objections directly. The corporate argument was technically credible, the evidence was publicly visible, and the tension between those two things, institutional authority on one side, documented transparency on the other, drove everything that followed. The wall Bugatti built. Bugatti's response was swift, coordinated, and institutional in a way that felt deliberate from the first moment. As soon as the rebuild project became public knowledge, Bugatti locked the car's vehicle identification number, the unique code embedded in every car that connects it to the global parts and service network. Locking the VIN had one practical effect. No authorized Bugatti dealer anywhere on Earth could legally sell a single component for this specific chassis. It was a targeted restriction applied to one car, and it cut Matt Armstrong off from the entire official supply chain at the source. He could not walk into a Bugatti dealership, could not order through an authorized intermediary, and could not access the parts catalog through any legitimate channel. The message was clear. Bugatti had decided that this Chiron Pur Sport should never drive again, and it intended to enforce that decision through the supply system rather than through legal action. The parts blockade came with public justification from the top of the company. Matt Armstrong, the Croatian founder who served as CEO of Bugatti Rimac, addressed the situation directly in a video posted to his social media. He acknowledged his personal respect.
Can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment and only a few people in the world with the right training to be able to do that.
For Matt Armstrong and his genuine enjoyment of the content. Then he drew a firm line. The damage to the Chiron Pur Sport was not cosmetic. The gearbox housing had shattered. The carbon monocoque, the structural shell that forms the absolute foundation of the car's engineering, had sustained damage requiring equipment and expertise that no independent workshop realistically possessed. He pointed to a specific and striking technical detail as illustration. During cold weather testing of a new Bugatti model, engineers had discovered that leather upholstery on the dashboard could stiffen enough in extreme temperatures to interfere with airbag deployment, requiring specific production adjustments that only the factory could implement. It was the kind of detail that demonstrated how deeply Bugatti's engineering complexity ran, and how far that complexity extended beyond what any visible inspection could reveal. The argument was technically serious. Bugatti is not a conventional car company in any meaningful sense. Its vehicles are engineered to tolerances that place them in a fundamentally different category from almost any other production machine. The Chiron Pur Sport's quad-turbocharged 16-cylinder engine produces over 1,500 horsepower from a package that requires continuous management by proprietary systems built specifically for that exact architecture. The structural carbon fiber is not interchangeable with generic alternatives. The aerodynamic balance is calibrated to a precision that makes deviations from factory specification potentially significant at the speeds the car was designed to reach. These were not invented concerns. They were real engineering realities articulated by someone who had built some of the most technically advanced electric hypercars in the world. And yet the rebuild continued. Because Matt Armstrong had a public record of solving problems that official assessments had declared unsolvable, and because the audience watching had enough accumulated trust in his process to follow him into territory the manufacturer said should not be entered. What happened in the workshop over the months that followed was extraordinary by any honest assessment. Matt and his team separated the front of the car from the rear. A procedure Bugatti had indicated only 2 facilities in the world were equipped to perform. They repaired the transmission mount using fabricated components. They sourced airbags by identifying shared part numbers with an Audi A3.
It comes up with an exact Audi A3 knee airbag, which is £50, and it's exactly the same.
A consequence of the Volkswagen Group's platform-sharing philosophy running through multiple brands, including those in Bugatti's supply chain. They fabricated custom radiators from scratch, over dozens of hours, without access to a factory reference scan. They worked through every problem that had no official solution, because the official solution had been deliberately withheld, and they documented every step publicly for millions of people watching in real time. The corporate wall was still standing. The car was coming back to life inside it anyway. When Porsche hit the wall in 2025, Porsche AG reported financial results that stunned an automotive industry that had considered it among the most reliably profitable luxury brands in the world. Operating profit did not merely dip, it collapsed by 92.7%. The profit margin fell from 14.1%. Genuinely healthy by any premium manufacturer standard, to 1.1%. That is a margin that does not fund serious product development, does not support strategic investment, and does not provide the financial buffer that a brand operating at Porsche's level requires to maintain its competitive position. For context, Porsche had been cited for years as a model of how to run a high-end car company: strong pricing power, consistent aspirational demand, margins that made its peers in the Volkswagen Group look at it with envy. The 2025 results erased that narrative in a single reporting cycle. The causes were interconnected and mutually reinforcing. Global sales dropped approximately 10%. The Chinese market, which had become critically important to Porsche's volume numbers and revenue line, pulled back sharply. The electric vehicle models that Porsche had invested heavily in and staked its future direction on were sitting on dealership lots across major markets rather than moving to buyers. The Macan Electric, the Taycan lineup, the electrified SUV variants, all were experiencing the market resistance that had been building across the premium EV segment as the early adopter. Wave-saturated and broader consumer hesitation proved more stubborn than projections had assumed. And through all of it, the 911, the car Porsche had repeatedly tried to de-emphasize in the rush toward electrification, remained the single product, keeping the brand's financial performance from becoming genuinely catastrophic. The car they had tried to move away from was the only reason the lights were still on. Volkswagen Group, which held the majority of Porsche, was simultaneously managing its own financial pressures of comparable severity. The cost-cutting directives flowing down from VW to Porsche were not suggestions. They were structural requirements. When Porsche's management surveyed its asset portfolio, looking for ways to generate cash quickly, the 45% stake in Bugatti Rimac presented itself as an obvious candidate.
Porsche will divest its 45% stake in Bugatti Rimac.
Bugatti produces remarkable cars in extraordinarily small volumes, approximately 40 vehicles per year at its production peak. It generates prestige and media attention on a scale that far exceeds its output. What it does not generate is the kind of revenue that justifies holding a significant ownership stake when the parent organization urgently needs liquidity. Bugatti is not a Macan. It is not a 911. It has no operational connection to the core sports car business that Porsche was fighting to stabilize. Selling it was financially rational in a way that admitted no serious counter-argument from anyone inside the building. On April 24, 2026, Porsche announced it had agreed to sell its entire stake in Bugatti Rimac to a consortium led by Hachof Capital, a New York-based investment firm holding existing positions in SpaceX, Anthropic, and Epic Games. Porsche's 20.6% stake in Rimac Group was included in the same transaction. Financial terms were not publicly disclosed, but analyst estimates placed the combined value at approximately $500 million. The deal transferred full operational control of Bugatti to Matt Armstrong, the Croatian entrepreneur who had started his career converting old BMWs to electric power in a garage and ended it as the undivided CEO of one of the most famous automotive brands in history. For Rimac personally, this was the completion of something that had seemed improbable at almost every stage of its development. The 7 words that changed the story. Porsche CEO Dr. Oliver Blume delivered the company's statement with the precision and care that major corporate announcements of this kind require. He acknowledged the years of partnership. He expressed gratitude toward Matt Armstrong for constructive cooperation throughout the joint venture. He described the transaction as consistent with Porsche's strategic priorities going forward. And then he said the 7 words that the automotive internet immediately and instinctively connected to a workshop in Leicester and a car that Bugatti had spent months trying to keep off the road. Porsche needed to focus on the core business. In a standard corporate context, those words mean nothing more than what they say. In the context of April 2026, with the Matt Armstrong rebuild saga still running in real time, with Porsche having been a partial owner of Bugatti throughout the entire VIN locking, parts blocking, CEO video controversy, they landed with an entirely different weight than the speaker almost certainly intended. The automotive internet did not require instruction to make the connection. Comment sections under every major channel filled within hours. The dominant interpretation was immediate. The billion-dollar corporate structure that had stood behind Bugatti's decision to lock a VIN and cut off parts to one independent mechanic had just admitted, in 7 words, that the whole arrangement was not worth maintaining. That the prestige, the institutional safety arguments, the public positioning, the carefully protected image of technical exclusivity, none of it constituted the core business that Porsche actually needed to be. And if Bugatti was not core to Porsche's business, then everything Bugatti had done to protect its brand during the rebuild controversy had been done under the partial ownership of a company that was about to sell that ownership for emergency cash. The timing made the logic feel irresistible, even to viewers who understood that the 2 events were not directly connected. The more careful reading, and the one that most serious automotive analysts favored, was that Porsche's decision was driven entirely by a 92.7% profit collapse.
But it is a massive hit, 3.1 billion euros in 2025.
And had nothing to do with a YouTube channel or a Leicester workshop. That connecting a multi-hundred-million-dollar corporate divestiture to internet drama was exactly the kind of narrative reach that social media platforms reward and that serious analysis should resist. Both readings contain truth. Porsche sold because it needed money. The timing did coincide with the most public phase of the rebuild controversy. The CEO's language genuinely was standard corporate communication, and the connection between that language and the institutional framework that had blocked Matt Armstrong's parts access was something the automotive community had every legitimate reason to notice. What made the story remarkable was not that one reading was right and the other wrong. It was that both were simultaneously valid, and that the collision between them produced something the automotive world had not seen before. Matt Armstrong himself had said in podcast interviews that his relationship with Rimac was more complicated than a straightforward corporate war, that both of them cared about cars, that they had mutual connections within the industry, and that the institutional machinery had turned something that might have been a conversation into something that became a confrontation. He had also indicated that he believed someone at a level above Rimac, within the corporate structure, had been driving the refusal to sell parts, that Rimac's personal position and the official corporate position had not been identical. With Porsche gone from the ownership structure, that corporate layer above Rimac had been removed. Whether anything about Bugatti's practical approach to independent repair would change as a result was genuinely unclear. But the perception that something had shifted, that the wall had been revealed as less permanent than it appeared, had taken hold in the automotive community and was not going anywhere. when Bugatti lost control of the story. The practical implications of Porsche's exit were real but considerably more complex than the corporate collapse narrative that swept through the automotive internet suggested. Bugatti did not transform overnight on April 24, 2026. The Tourbillon, the next-generation hypercar replacing the W16 engine with an 1,800-horsepower hybrid V16 powertrain, was still deep in development, its timeline unchanged. The engineering team in Molsheim was still at their stations. The brand's production philosophy and quality standards did not change because the ownership structure above it had been reorganized by a transaction in a New York boardroom. What changed was the architecture of authority surrounding Bugatti and the concentration of decision-making power within it. Matt Armstrong now controlled Bugatti directly, not as a partner managing competing institutional interests, but as the undivided operational authority, in partnership with investors whose philosophy was oriented toward technology and long-term growth, rather than the institutional conservatism that the Volkswagen Group's presence had historically brought to every major decision. HOF Capital's existing positions in SpaceX, Anthropic, and Epic Games signaled an investment orientation toward companies that push at technical boundaries rather than protect established legacy positions. Neither HOF Capital nor Blue 5 Capital carried the same instinct for brand protection through restriction that a German automotive conglomerate naturally brings into its ownership decisions. For Rimac personally, the change was significant in a specific way. He had said publicly that he admired Matt Armstrong and his work. He had said he would have been glad to support the rebuild as a fellow car enthusiast who understood what Armstrong was attempting. He had implied, more than once, that institutional constraints above him, not his own judgment, had driven the official corporate hardline. Those constraints had just been restructured in a way that gave him considerably more room to act on his own instincts. Whether he would use that room to change Bugatti's practical approach to independent repair remained genuinely unclear, but the conditions under which such a change could happen had shifted in a direction that made it more possible than it had been the day before. The broader significance of the entire story runs deeper than any single rebuild project or corporate ownership change. The Matt Armstrong and Bugatti conflict arrived at exactly the moment when the right to repair debate was reaching genuine critical mass across multiple major industries simultaneously. John Deere had spent years systematically blocking independent repair of its agricultural equipment and had faced mounting regulatory and legal pressure across multiple jurisdictions as a result. Apple had fought parallel battles over third-party iPhone repair, with similar consequences in the courts and in legislative bodies across the United States and Europe. In the automotive sector, the transition toward electric vehicles, with their proprietary software architectures, sealed battery systems, and manufacturer-controlled diagnostics, was making independent maintenance progressively more difficult across the entire market at once. The trajectory was consistent across every industry it touched, and the direction it pointed toward was one where the act of owning something no longer automatically carried the right to fix it. The question was no longer theoretical. It was arriving in workshops and dealerships and courtrooms at the same time. What Matt Armstrong's project did, entirely without setting out to do it, was put that trajectory in front of millions of ordinary people who had never thought about repair legislation in a format they could follow and feel personally invested in. Millions of viewers watched a real person with documented skills being systematically blocked by institutional machinery from performing work he was demonstrably capable of performing. The response was not abstract. It was immediate, personal, and visceral in the way that policy arguments delivered in legislative testimony never managed to be. Stories do the work that lobbying cannot. Matt had set out to fix a car. The car happened to be one of 60 Chiron Pur Sports. The manufacturer happened to respond with an institutional blockade. And the corporate structure behind that blockade happened to publicly collapse, in real time, in front of the same audience watching the rebuild, while the car was still being put back together. That sequence of events transformed an already remarkable story into something the automotive world will still be discussing long after the rebuilt. Chiron has driven past every Porsche dealership in Leicester, so here is where everything stands. A self-taught mechanic set out to rebuild one of 60 Bugatti Chiron Pur Sports ever made. The manufacturer locked the VIN, blacklisted every dealer, and publicly declared the project impossible. Then the company that owned nearly half of Bugatti collapsed financially and walked away. Its CEO saying 7 words that landed like a verdict. A 92.7% profit collapse, a $500 million exit, and a car still being rebuilt in Leicester while all of it happened. Was Porsche's exit the ultimate validation for Matt Armstrong? Or does Bugatti still have a point no matter who owns it? Drop your answer below, hit like and subscribe. This story is not finished yet.